Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Danny. This is a post-fight reaction sort of video to what we saw over the weekend. Artur Beterbiew became the first man to defeat Dmitry Bivol in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to become undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world. If you enjoy this video, please do subscribe to it. Subscribe to our channel, ESBR Boxing, if you haven't done so already. Danny, I want to get your opinion on whether we'll ever see Artur Beterbiev get beaten. 21 and 0 now. All of his fights except one have ended in a stoppage. Um, I'll start off with kind of a rematch against Dmitry Bivol. Beterbiev about to turn 40 as well. Let's not forget that, but still looking impressive. If there is a rematch, how confident would you be that Beterbiev would win again?
Like, I completely understand the logic in people picking Dmitry Bivol in a potential rematch, being, as you mentioned, Artur Beterbiev not getting any younger. I don't think he looked at his best against Dmitry Bivol, and saying that, I did have him scraping the fight, but I do think you have to put a lot of emphasis on the knee surgery he had
Mm.
at the back end of May. Doing some research, like the recovery time before you can even have a jog after meniscus surgery can be 2 to 3 months. So I wonder what sort of camp he had. And the thing I noticed was his output and his pressure wasn't as constant as it has been, particularly against Callum Smith. I mean, he barely took his foot off the gas the whole fight, where you noticed almost round long breaks against Dmitry Bivol, large portions of rounds. He would sort of get in the back foot, just get behind his jab. You've got to give Dmitry Bivol credit for that too. But I think if the fight was to happen in, say, 6 months from now, I would favor Beterbiev to beat him more convincingly. I'm not sure how, if that's a consensus opinion amongst people, but I just think when he was getting the Bivol wasn't necessarily hurt or, scrambled for his senses, but he was very uncomfortable. And I think if Beterbiev was able to sustain that more, I actually think he could force the stoppage. So that's what I would lean towards if a rematch was to happen, say, summer next year.
Interesting. Whilst we're on the topic, do you think we're going to see a rematch? I've not heard any sort of rematch clause. It was a very close fight. Obviously, there are some people there who think Bivol won. There are some people who are quite upset the fact that Bivol didn't win. No, not mentioning any names. But do you think we're going to see a rematch, Danny?
I think so. I think the only way we don't see a rematch is if Beterbiev retires,
Hmm.
which there doesn't seem to be any rumblings of. I mean, Turkey Al Sheikh made no secret of the fact he wants a rematch. He had the fight to Bivol, and we've saw if he wants these fights to happen, they generally do. I think it's the biggest fight for both. After last night, I would have concerns about Beterbiev moving up to cruiserweight, which is maybe something we'll potentially come on to discuss. There's no real big fights at light heavyweight for them. The David Benavidez fight aside would probably be the biggest one. That we've heard no real mention of that. So I would imagine a rematch is very likely to be next.
Yeah, fair enough. I think you mentioned David Benavidez there. Of course, it would be an interesting fight. I kind of hope for his own sake, David Benavidez kind of gets a big fight of his own in the next 12 months, but we'll see. You mentioned the move up to cruiserweight. Danny was definitely going to bring that up. Pre-fight, there were talks of Beterbiev going to cruiserweight after this fight. I think one thing about the move up to cruiserweight is just there's only one man in that division that people really want to see Beterbiev face, Jai Opetaia. Do you see that as a genuine possibility? Opetaia kind of could possibly be facing the winner of Chris Billam-Smith versus Gilberto Ramirez in his next fight. Maybe not. But do you think Beterbiev, if he doesn't fight Bivol next, do you think we'll see that move up to cruiserweight, or do you think it's more likely he'd fight someone else at light heavyweight?
I do think it will be the Bivol rematch next. If it wasn't, I'm not sure what it would be. And I don't want to see him fight Jai Opetaia. I think neither man was hurt on Saturday night, but there was a couple of times Beterbiev was like knocked back on his heels, and Jai Opetaia is a much bigger man than Dmitry Bivol and a much bigger puncher than Dmitry Bivol. and he's showing he's teak tough as well. He was hurt a couple of times by Maris Breidis, but never touched down. Got through both fights, and Maris Breidis maybe doesn't have the reputation of an Artur Beterbiev, but when you factor in how much bigger he is, if he can take the shots from Maris Breidis, he can probably take Beterbiev's best shots and just getting better every fight, it seems, Opetaia. So I wouldn't like that matchup for Beterbiev, to be honest. I think he'd be a pretty big underdog there for me after what we saw on Saturday.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, interesting. We'll have to see what Opetaia does next. And Beterbiev, I do agree with you. I do think we're going to see a rematch. I do think it's the fight that Turki Al Sheikh wants to happen. It's another massive payday for both fighters. So I agree with you. I've got one. I think my only kind of final question, for you, Danny, is what do you see happening in the remainder of Beterbiev's career? If this rematch does happen, Beterbiev will be 40. Say Beterbiev win, you're right, and Beterbiev wins the rematch. Do you think that that's then going to be it? Do you think he's going to chase greatness and go for this fight with Opetaia? A fight with Canelo has been talked about as a possibility with Canelo. Obviously, I'm sure you'd have the undisputed, or nearly undisputed super middleweight champion Canelo Alvarez facing the undisputed light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev. Do you see that as a possibility for Beterbiev? What do you see kind of the grander stages of Beterbiev's career looking like? Whether it's one fight left or two or three?
It's hard to know. I almost half get the impression he might carry on until he's beat, to be honest, and then just when he loses, that'll be it, which is obviously the majority of fighters retire on a loss, don't they? I think if he fights Bivol again and beats him, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the winner of David Benavidez, David Morrell, to be next. I don't think Benavidez is going to get that Canelo fight. I don't think David Morrell is either. I think 168 is a very tough weight cut for Benavidez, and particularly if he was to come through David Morrell, because he's a star in his own right. Benavidez, he's headline pay-per-views off his own back, and they've done quite well. So I think that would potentially be the fight for Beterbiev. I think the people around him will know maybe that a move up to cruiserweight to fight Jai Opetaia, whilst it would be an unbelievable win from a legacy point of view, is potentially not a favourable matchup stylistically. And I think Benavidez would probably be a bigger fight when you factor in the American audience he's got. He's a much bigger name worldwide than Jai Opetaia for my money. So again, factor in lots of external variables and what's going to happen in a couple of future fights. But if the stars did align, I wouldn't be surprised if that fight happened at some point, 2025, 2026.
Lots of ifs, buts, and maybes. Final question, Danny. Does a Canelo fight appeal to you? Canelo was last out against Edgar Berlanga last month. We don't know who he's going to be fighting next. If you ask me, I think it's fairly unclear who Canelo's going to be fighting next. I'm really not sure. But that's good. Look, I wonder if that's a possibility for Beterbiev for that fight to happen next, or to happen at the end of 2025, possibly. Is that a fight that would appeal to you? Do you want to see that fight at light heavyweight, by the way?
Oh, I would love to see the fight. I don't think it's a particularly competitive fight. I would make Beterbiev a big favorite to beat and stop Canelo Alvarez. Um, I think I suppose the allure of potentially becoming an undisputed champion at a second weight would appeal to Canelo, but yeah, he's been careful with his matchmaking to say the least over the past couple of years, and he clearly has that fear of losing. I don't think I'm not sure he's saying he's scared of any one particular fighter, but I think he is scared of losing again, and the way you can lose to Beterbiev is not the way you lose to Dmitry Bivol.
No,
So
that's true.
I don't know.
We'll see. We'll see. All right. Well, look, Beterbiev, such an exciting fight. It was such a fantastic fight that we saw on Saturday. So keen to know what he does next. But yeah, just such an exciting fight, and we'll see. Danny, good to speak to you as always, and I will speak to you again very, very soon.
No problem.